The Galactic Council had been running the universe for approximately 12,000 years, give or take a few centuries that nobody could quite account for due to a filing error in the Department of Temporal Records. On this particular day, which happened to be a Tuesday by at least 15 different planetary calendars, Senior Administrator Vex Thela sat in Conference Room 3B, staring at what would soon become the single worst decision in the history of organized galactic governance. The problem was simple. The solution was not. "We have 2,733 dead worlds," announced Vex Thela, his three eye stalks drooping with exhaustion. "Planets with valuable resources, planets with strategic importance, planets that are, unfortunately, completely and utterly lethal to every known form of intelligent life." Around the massive circular table, representatives from 86 species shifted uncomfortably. The Krillathian delegate's scales turned a pale shade of anxiety yellow. The Morfendian ambassador's gas cloud contracted nervously. Even the Voidwalker observer, who technically didn't have a physical form, managed to convey profound unease. "How lethal are we discussing?" asked Council Member Thrixanar, whose species prided itself on being able to survive in 3% oxygen atmospheres. "Category 5, Category 8. Category what the hell were we thinking?" Vex Thela replied flatly. "These are worlds where the atmosphere is corrosive, where gravity crushes bones like breadsticks, where the local bacteria consider metal a light snack, where the weather has teeth." The room fell silent, except for the gentle humming of the environmental systems, which kept the chamber at a comfortable temperature that satisfied exactly nobody, but offended everyone equally. Junior Administrator Plockneth, who had been with the Council for approximately 6 weeks and still hadn't figured out how the coffee machine worked, raised a tentacle hesitantly. "Sir, I might have a solution." Every eye, stalk, sensor, and probability field in the room turned toward the young Glothrakian. "I created a volunteer request form for colonization and resource extraction on hostile worlds. I posted it on the Galactic Network 3 days ago." Plockneth's voice grew smaller with each word. Was that wrong?" Vex Thela's primary eye stalk bent at an angle that shouldn't have been biologically possible. "You did what?" "The form is very comprehensive," Plockneth squeaked. "It lists all the dangers: atmospheric composition, gravity variance, predator density, geological instability, radiation levels that would make a star feel inadequate." "How many responses?" Vex Thela was now standing, which was impressive given his species didn't technically have legs. 38,412. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that archaeologists discover in ancient tombs, sealed and undisturbed for millennia. It was a silence so profound that it had weight. That's actually more than we need," whispered Thrixanar. "That's volunteers for every death world, with redundancy." "From how many species?" Vex Thela asked, his voice carefully controlled. Plockneth consulted his datapad. His skin turned an apologetic shade of purple. One. Humans. The word hung in the air like a bad smell at a diplomatic function. "Humans," repeated Vex Thela slowly, as if testing whether the word might explode. "The species that only joined the Council 8 years ago. The species from that ridiculous planet where everything tries to kill them. The species that considers extreme sports a recreational activity." "That would be them, sir." "The species that drinks poison for fun." "Ethanol, sir." "Yes." Vex Thela sat back down. Or rather, he collapsed into his chair in a manner that suggested his entire understanding of the universe had just been thoroughly mugged in a dark alley. "Show me the applications." The holographic display flickered to life, showing row after row after row of human names. Each application included a video statement. Plockneth, trembling slightly, selected one at random. A human female with bright red hair appeared, grinning with an expression that could only be described as enthusiastic derangement. Hi, I'm Kendra Voss, and I'd like to volunteer for literally any of your death planets. I've climbed Mount Everest 3 times, swum with great white sharks, and once spent 6 months in Antarctica wearing only a t-shirt because I lost a bet. Looking at your list, that one with the acid rain and the carnivorous rocks looks amazing. When can I start? Plockneth closed the video. They're all roughly like that. Roughly like that, Vexthilla repeated in a hollow voice. Define roughly. Another video. A young human male with an unfortunate haircut and the kind of smile that suggested he'd never met a bad decision he didn't immediately befriend. Yo, Ratch Cormindel here. That planet with 900% Earth gravity, sign me up. I've been doing weight training my whole life, and I'm ready to take it to the next level. My bones are prepared. A third video, an older human with grey hair and the weathered face of someone who had looked death in the eye and asked it for directions. Name's Tobrick Hend. I'm a geologist. Been studying your files on planet GX339. You've labelled it tectonically unstable beyond survivability. And I've worked in worse. Have you seen California? What's a California? Asked Thrixnar weakly. I don't know, and I don't want to know, Vexthilla said. This is insane. They're insane. We can't send them to these worlds. It would be murder. Technically, sir, they volunteered. Legal reviewed the form. It's completely airtight. We literally cannot refuse them without violating our own colonization agreements. Who in the name of quantum entropy reviewed this form? You did, sir. Last Thursday, you signed off on it. Vexthilla pulled up his schedule from last Thursday. There it was, right between lunch and existential dread regarding budget allocations. He had approved Form GC9242V without reading it, because it was from the Volunteer Services Division, and nothing from Volunteer Services had ever been important until now. How bad is bad? Vexthilla asked, pulling up the Deathworld files. Show me the worst one. The hologram displayed a planet that looked like it had been designed by a cosmic committee that was having a very bad day. Planet designation, Theta Shriek 9. Surface temperature varies between 400 degrees and minus 300 degrees depending on which side is facing the sun. Atmosphere is 60% methane, 30% ammonia, 10% things we haven't identified yet, but make our senses cry. Gravity is 6.8 times galactic standard. Native life forms include acid-spitting, 6-legged bear equivalents, flying serpents with neurotoxic venom, and a fungus that eats through standard environmental suits in 12 minutes. And someone volunteered for this? Plockneth checked. 19 humans volunteered for this one specifically, sir. Several mentioned it looked refreshing. Vexthilla made a sound that his species usually reserved for moments of profound spiritual crisis. Get me the human ambassador, now. 20 minutes later, Ambassador Lissa Thorne walked into conference room 3B with the kind of confident stride that suggested she was either extremely competent or extremely good at faking it. Possibly both. You wanted to see me, Administrator? Your people. Vexthilla began, his eye stalks quivering with barely contained hysteria, have volunteered for suicide missions, 38,000 of them. Ambassador Thorne blinked. The Deathworld colonization program? Oh yes, we're very excited about that. We've been getting calls all day. Apparently there's a waiting list forming. A waiting list? The adventure tourism industry is thriving. Do you have any idea how hard it is to find unspoiled wilderness anymore? Earth is getting crowded. Everyone wants a piece of genuine frontier experience. These aren't tourist destinations. These are death traps. Ambassador Thorne sat down and folded her hands with the patience of someone explaining basic physics to a particularly slow child. Administrator Vexthilla, let me tell you about Earth. Our planet has deserts where the temperature reaches 60 degrees Celsius. We have poles where it drops to minus 90. We have storms that flatten cities, earthquakes that reshape coastlines, volcanoes that block out the sun. Ocean trenches that would crush your ship like a paper cup, and we have humans living in all of them. That's different, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're offering my people paid opportunities to do what we've been doing for free for millennia, exploring places that try to kill us. We specialize in it. Council member Thrixnar leaned forward. Ambassador, with all due respect, your planet is an anomaly. These worlds are worse. Ambassador Thorne's smile could have cut glass. Define worse. The hologram reactivated, showing a nightmare of a planet with purple skies and continents that appeared to be actively melting. This is Kreshnor Prime. The atmosphere contains sulfuric acid vapor. The local fauna includes pack hunters with 18 eyes and claws that vibrate at frequencies that shatter bone. The plant life is mobile and carnivorous. Water doesn't exist except as underground ice pockets filled with things we hope are microbes. Average survival time for a standard exploration team is 4 hours. What's the gravity? 8.2 standard. Oxygen level? 9%. Ambassador Thorne pulled out her personal datapad and started typing. How much are you paying? That's your response? How much are we paying? Administrator, I have 3 Olympic athletes, 2 professional extreme sports competitors, and a marine biologist who wrestles crocodiles for research purposes, all asking me about compensation packages. They're not concerned about surviving, they're concerned about benefits. Vexthilor felt something inside him break. It might have been his sanity. It might have been his understanding of cause and effect. It might have been both. This is madness. No, Ambassador Thorne said calmly. This is humanity. We climbed out of trees, walked across ice ages, sailed across oceans in wooden boats, and built cities in places where nothing should live. You're not offering us death traps. You're offering us adventure. There's a difference. People are going to die. Probably. They've accepted that. The forms are very clear. I read them. Unlike some people. She glanced meaningfully at Vexthilor. Legal liability is covered. Next of kin notifications are arranged. We even have a funeral service that specializes in unique circumstances. They're very good. The council sat in stunned silence. You're serious, Vexthilor said finally. You're actually going to let them do this? I can't stop them. Have you seen human history? We once had a man who jumped out of the stratosphere wearing only a suit for fun. We have people who free climb 1,000-meter cliffs without ropes. We have reality shows about surviving in hostile environments. This is Tuesday for us. I don't understand your species, Vexthilor whispered. Nobody does, Ambassador Thorne said cheerfully. Not even us. Now, about those compensation packages? The following week, the first wave of human volunteers arrived at the Galactic Council screening facility on Station Omega-5. The facility had been designed to process, at maximum efficiency, approximately 50 candidates per day. It was not prepared for the 3,000 humans who showed up in the first hour. Chief Medical Officer Rinthala, whose species had evolved in peaceful meadows under gentle suns, stared at the crowd with all 4 of her eyes and felt her faith in universal order dissolve like sugar in acid rain. They were smiling, all of them. "Next volunteer!" she called weakly. A tall human male stepped forward, his skin darker than space, and his grin bright enough to be a navigation hazard. "Howdy! Grayson Pitch reporting for duty." Rinthala pulled up his file. "You've applied for Colony Assignment VX-882, the world-designated Screamfall." "Love that name. What's it scream about?" "The wind velocity creates sonic frequencies that rupture eardrums, hence the name." She waited for him to reconsider. He did not. "You understand that standard hearing protection is insufficient, that prolonged exposure causes permanent damage?" "Doc, I've been to metal concerts that probably did worse. Plus, I'm part deaf in one ear already. Industrial accident. I'm ahead of the game." Rinthala's tentacles trembled. "Mr. Pitch, this world has storms that last for months. The rain is slightly acidic. The local predators hunt in packs of 50 and can smell blood from 20 kilometers away. So, light rain and puppies. Got it. The gravity is 5 times your homeworld standard. Grayson Pitch flexed an arm the size of a small tree trunk. Been doing resistance training my whole life, Doc. My bones are dense. Medical reports in my file. I'm built for this. She checked. He was right. His bone density was 30% above human average. This is still suicide. Nah, suicide is staying on Earth, working a desk job until I'm 80. This is living. She stamped his approval with a tentacle that felt numb. Next volunteer. A woman with short blonde hair and scars across both arms approached. Her name was Kellis Vord. She'd applied for a world where the atmosphere was so thin that water boiled at room temperature. "You're a xenobotanist?" Rinthala asked, reviewing the file. "Yep. Specialized in extreme environment plant life. Your files mention there are flowering plants on designation Dry 9 that survive in near-vacuum conditions. I have to see them. The atmospheric pressure is 0.4 standard. You'll need a suit at all times. The radiation levels cause cellular degradation. The temperature swings will require careful monitoring and excellent equipment, which I have. Doc, I spent 2 years in the Atacama Desert studying lichens. I know extreme. This is just extreme with different parameters." "Why?" Rinthala asked desperately. "Why would you want this?" Kellis Vord's expression turned serious, almost reverent. "Because nobody's seen these things up close. Because there's life there that evolved under conditions we barely understand. Because science, Doc. Because learning things nobody else knows. That's not dangerous. That's privilege." Rinthala approved her too. And the next volunteer, and the next, and the next. An engineer who wanted to study plate tectonics on a world where the continents rearranged themselves every 6 months. An atmospheric scientist excited about studying storms that lasted years. A geologist who practically vibrated with joy discussing a planet where diamond formations grew like flowers. By day 3, Rinthala had processed 800 volunteers. By day 7, she'd lost count. They all had the same expression, that smile, that absolute conviction that horrifying danger was somehow opportunity. During a brief break, she found herself sitting next to a human volunteer in the waiting area, an older woman with grey hair and laugh lines, who was reading a datapad about a planet where the indigenous life included airborne jellyfish that hunted using electrical discharges. "Excuse me," Rinthala said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" The woman looked up. "Sure, hon. Why are you here? And please don't say adventure or science or any of the responses I've been hearing. What is it really?" The woman considered this. Her name badge read Phila Korst. "You know what the worst thing about Earth is? It's safe now. We've mapped everything, climbed everything, explored everything. There's no place left where you can go and genuinely not know what's around the next corner. These worlds you're offering, they're the last real frontiers, and I'm 63 years old. I want to see something nobody has seen before I die, even if the seeing kills me, especially then, actually. Better than dying in a hospital bed." "That's insane." "Probably." Phila Korst smiled. "But it's our kind of insane, and you asked." The screening process took 3 weeks. At the end, Vexthila received a report that made him consider early retirement. Approval rate 98.6%. Rejection reasons 2% medical disqualifications, 0.4% psychological concerns that even humans agreed were worrying. "They're all going to die," he said to Ambassador Thorne during an emergency meeting. "Some of them definitely," she agreed. "We've accounted for that. Mortality rate projections are in the analysis. We're estimating 20% casualties in the first year." 20%! "We think that's conservative. But, Administrator, you're missing something important. For every human who dies on those worlds, 2 more will want to go. Danger doesn't discourage us. It's basically advertising." "How did your species survive this long?" Ambassador Thorne laughed. "Spite, mostly. And really good immune systems. Now, when do the first deployments leave? The first transport ships departed 3 days later. Vex Thelor watched the departures from Station Omega-5's observation deck, feeling like he was witnessing the universe's most elaborate suicide pact. 12 ships, 400 humans per ship, each heading to a different nightmare world. "They're singing," noted Plocknoth, who was standing beside him. Indeed, from several of the transports, broadcasts of human music echoed through the station's communication channels. Loud, energetic music with incomprehensible lyrics about freedom and adventure and living forever. "I don't understand them," Vex Thelor said. "Nobody does, sir. I've been reading human history. Did you know they once had a period called the Age of Exploration, where they sailed across oceans not knowing what was on the other side? Thousands died, and they kept going. Why? The records suggest they found it interesting, sir." Vex Thelor watched the ships disappear into faster-than-light travel, carrying their cargo of enthusiastic lunatics toward worlds that had killed every survey team sent to study them. "Update me the moment we receive the first status reports. I want to know immediately when this disaster begins." The first status reports arrived 6 weeks later. Vex Thelor read them in his office alone, with a bottle of Krylothian anxiety medication nearby. From Colony Team Alpha, planet designation, Screamfall status, operational casualties, 0 notes, initial landing successful. Team has established Base Camp 1 in the planetary equivalent of a wind shadow. Hearing protection adequate. Local predators observed but have not approached camp. Team members report conditions as brisk and refreshing. Request additional supplies for planned expansion into Stormbelt region for better views. Vex Thelor read it 3 times, then read it again, then checked the planetary designation to make sure it was the same Screamfall. The one with the ear-rupturing winds, the acid rain, the pack-hunting monsters. They wanted to move closer to the storms for better views. From Colony Team Beta, planet designation Dry9. Status, operational casualties. 3 injured, non-critical. Treated on-site. Notes, atmospheric conditions as expected. Temperature regulation challenging but manageable. Xenobotanist Vord has catalogued 63 new plant species in first 3 weeks. Team morale described as excellent. 1 injury from falling off rock formation during sample collection. 2 injuries from attempting to pet local 6-legged creatures that turned out to be mildly venomous. Team requests better cameras and asks if they can keep one of the creatures as a base mascot. They wanted to keep the venomous creature as a mascot. From Colony Team Delta, planet designation Kreshnor Prime. Status, operational casualties. 1 deceased, environmental suit failure during solo exploration against protocol. 4 injured notes, sulfuric acid atmosphere neutralized using modified filtration systems. Gravity adaptation proceeding ahead of schedule. Local fauna more aggressive than anticipated, but team has developed appropriate deterrents involving loud noises and thrown rocks. Team has successfully established mining operation and extracted 3 tons of valuable minerals in first month. Morale high. Request pizza delivery if at all possible, also alcohol. 1 dead. Vex Thelor felt something twist in his chest. They'd lost someone. Finally, the reality would sink in. They'd evacuate. They'd come to their senses. He kept reading. Personal note from Team Lead Pitch, Colony Delta. "Yeah, we lost Hernandez. Environmental suit malfunction during unauthorized EVA. He knew the risks. His family's been notified. We're naming the first permanent structure after him. Otherwise, we're crushing it out here. This planet is amazing. Seriously, don't pull us out. We've got this." They weren't evacuating. They were naming buildings after the dead person and continuing. Report after report, colony after colony, 92% operational status, casualties well within projected parameters, resource extraction ahead of schedule, scientific discoveries exceeding expectations. and every single report included requests for more supplies, more equipment, and longer deployment periods. "They're thriving," Vextheler said to the empty office. "On worlds that should kill them, they're thriving." He pulled up the genetic profile of humans that the Council had on file. Standard carbon-based biology, bilateral symmetry, oxygen breathers. Nothing exceptional except... He stopped. The evolutionary history section. Earth. A Class 12 Deathworld. Higher classification than 80% of the planets they'd sent humans to. Humans hadn't volunteered for Deathworlds because they were crazy. They'd volunteered because they were from one. This was normal for them. Vextheler started laughing. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just realized they'd been outsmarted by a species they'd considered primitive 8 years ago. His communication panel blinked. Incoming message from Ambassador Thorne. "Administrator, wonderful news. We've received 16,000 new applications for the Deathworld program. Apparently word got out about the first wave's success, and now everyone wants in. Can we fast-track approvals? Also, several of the established colonies are requesting permission to expand their population caps. They're calling it, and I quote, the opportunity of a lifetime. How soon can we arrange more transports?" Vextheler stared at the screen. "Ambassador Thorne, your people are insane. We prefer enthusiastically adaptable. So, about those transports? I'll arrange them." "Excellent. Oh, and one more thing. Colony Team Delta on Kreshnor Prime has started growing food in the local soil. Against all biological probability, it's working. They're asking if they can open a restaurant for tourists on a planet where the atmosphere eats through metal." Tourists? They're calling it extreme dining. The waiting list is already 300 people long. Humans are weird about food experiences. Can we discuss licensing? Vextheler closed the communication, sat in silence, then opened his bottom drawer and pulled out a bottle of something the Morfendians had given him that they swore would make consciousness optional for a few hours. He was seriously considering it when Plockneth entered his office, looking nervous. "Sir, we have a situation." "Of course we do. What now? Are the humans breeding the venomous animals? Starting a circus on the acid rain planet?" "Worse, sir. Other species are starting to ask questions." Vextheler's eye stalks straightened. "What kind of questions?" "The Krylothians want to know why humans get access to mineral-rich Deathworlds while they're stuck with safe but resource-poor colonies. The Voidwalkers are filing protests about unfair resource allocation. And the Morfendian Coalition is threatening to bring up human Deathworld access at the next council session as a violation of equal opportunity statutes. They want what? They want access to the Deathworlds too, sir." Vextheler felt reality bend sideways. "They can't. They'll die. These worlds are only survivable for humans because humans are biologically insane." "I mentioned that, sir. They're saying it's discriminatory." "It's not discrimination, it's biology." Plockneth shifted uncomfortably. "The Krylothian ambassador says that if humans can survive there, then with proper equipment and preparation, other species should be able to as well. He's demanding a trial expedition." "Absolutely not!" "He's threatening to file a formal complaint with the Galactic Rights Commission." Vextheler made a sound like a star collapsing into a black hole. "Fine, fine. One trial expedition. To the least dangerous Deathworld we have, with maximum safety protocols, and when it fails, which it will, we'll have legal precedent that these worlds are human-specific." 2 weeks later, an expedition of 6 Krylothians landed on planet designation Mir 9, which was the absolute least dangerous Deathworld in the catalogue. It had only slightly elevated gravity, only moderately toxic flora, only occasionally violent weather patterns. The Krylothians lasted 18 hours. They didn't die. That would have been easier to handle politically. Instead, they experienced what the medical report delicately termed comprehensive psychological collapse due to environmental stresses. In less delicate terms, they panicked, ran screaming back to their shuttle and refused to leave orbit until a rescue ship arrived. The human colony on Mir 9, which had been established 6 weeks earlier and consisted of 23 people living in prefabricated structures, sent a concerned message asking if the Krelothians needed medical assistance or perhaps some tea and a chat about acclimation strategies. The Krelothian ambassador withdrew his complaint, quietly, while heavily medicated, but the damage was done. Other species now knew that humans were occupying resource-rich worlds. And while they couldn't survive there themselves, they wanted access to those resources, which led to the single most awkward Galactic Council session in recorded history. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Ambassador Thorne said, her voice carefully neutral. "You want humans to extract resources from death worlds and sell them to other species at market rates?" "That is the proposal," confirmed Trade Minister Hixalorn, a squat being whose species specialized in complicated contracts and giving everyone headaches. "Humans have unique access to these previously unusable worlds. Fairness dictates that they should not monopolize the benefits. So you want us to do the dangerous work and share the profits, in exchange for reasonable compensation?" "Yes." Ambassador Thorne looked at Vexthila. Vexthila looked at the ceiling, praying to deities he didn't believe in for patience. "What's the compensation rate?" Ambassador Thorne asked. "Standard resource extraction rates, as defined by Council regulation." "No. I beg your pardon. No. Standard rates don't account for mortality risk. Our people are dying on these worlds. Not many, but some. Standard rates assume safe working conditions. These are not safe working conditions. These are, and I cannot stress this enough, death traps that we're only surviving through biological accident and pure, stubborn willpower." Trade Minister Hixalorn's skin flushed an irritated orange. "Then what rate do you propose?" "Triple standard rates, plus hazard pay, plus life insurance coverage for all workers, plus independent colony governance rights on all occupied death worlds." "Triple? That's outrageous." "No, triple is cheap considering your alternative is sending your own people who will last approximately 16 hours before experiencing what the Krelothians experienced. We're offering you access to resources you literally cannot get any other way. Triple is a bargain." The council chamber erupted in protests. 17 species began shouting simultaneously in 9 different languages. Vexthila banged his gavel repeatedly, creating a sound like a small explosion factory. "Order! We will take a recess and reconvene in 3 hours." During the recess, Vexthila found Ambassador Thorne in the diplomatic lounge, drinking something that smelled like it could strip paint. "You're enjoying this," he accused. "Little bit," she admitted. 8 years ago, we joined this council as the new species, the quirky primitives from the dangerous planet. Now you need us." "Yes, I'm enjoying it. You're going to bankrupt half the trading consortiums with those rates." "No, we're going to make them rich while making US richer. They get access to resources they couldn't obtain otherwise. We get compensated fairly for providing access. Everyone wins. That's how trade works." "And if the council refuses?" Ambassador Thorne shrugged. "Then we keep the resources for ourselves. Earth's population is growing. We need expansion room. These death worlds are perfect for us. We'll develop them independently, establish human-only colonies, and in 50 years we'll control resource streams worth more than most of your member species' entire economies. Your choice." Vexthila stared at her. "You've been planning this since week 2 of the colony deployments. When we realized this was going to work, my government isn't stupid, Administrator. We saw the opportunity. We created a monster. No, you created an opportunity. We just took advantage of it better than you expected. That's not monstrous, that's smart." The council reconvened. After 6 hours of heated debate, procedural objections and one brief physical altercation between the Morfendian and Krillothian delegates that required security intervention, they reached a compromise. Double standard rates, moderate hazard pay, limited colony governance rights, mandatory safety inspections. Humans maintained exclusive extraction rights, but agreed to sell resources at negotiated prices. Ambassador Thorne accepted the compromise with a smile that suggested she'd been planning to settle for exactly these terms the entire time. 3 months later, the Deathworld colonies had become the galaxy's worst-kept secret. Human mining operations on Kreshnor Prime were extracting rare minerals at rates that made the trade minister's head hurt. Xenobotanists on Dry9 had discovered pharmaceutical compounds that cured 3 previously untreatable diseases. The atmospheric research station on Screamfall had advanced meteorological science by 50 years, and humans kept volunteering. The waiting list now stretched to 98,000 names. But something unexpected was happening, something nobody had predicted. The Death Worlds were changing, not the planets themselves. Those remained exactly as hostile as before. But the perception was changing. What had once been considered useless hellscapes were now valuable real estate. Species throughout the galaxy were suddenly interested in worlds they'd previously written off as worthless, which created a new problem. Vex Thela learned about it when Ambassador Thorne requested an emergency private meeting. "We have claim jumpers," she said without preamble. "What?" 3 instances in the past month. Ships from non-council species trying to land on Death Worlds and establish their own operations. They see humans succeeding and think they can too. Did they succeed? 1 ship crashed due to atmospheric interference and everyone died. Another landed successfully, but the crew evacuated after 6 hours, citing medical emergencies. The 3rd is still there, technically, but they've barricaded themselves in their shuttle and are begging for rescue. So, not a problem. It's a problem because more are coming. Word is spreading beyond council space. Humans can survive on Death Worlds. Therefore, Death Worlds have value. Therefore, everyone wants a piece. We're going to need protection. Vex Thela felt a headache forming behind his primary eye stalk. You want council security forces deployed to protect human colonies? We want recognition that these are human territories, with all the legal protections that entails, including defense against unauthorized access. That would require amending the colonization charter. That takes months of debate. Then we'll provide our own security. Fair warning, though, human security forces can be enthusiastic. What does that mean? Ambassador Thorne's smile was not reassuring. It means that if you want this handled diplomatically, get us those legal protections. If you want this handled the human way, well, we're very good at defending things. We've had practice. The colonization charter amendments passed in record time, 8 weeks. The council was learning that when humans made threats, they weren't bluffing. They were warning you. Which is how the galaxy learned that humans didn't just colonize Death Worlds, they defended them, aggressively. The Blackwood Mining Consortium found this out when they attempted to land on Kreshnor Prime without authorization. Their ship was intercepted by a human patrol vessel. The patrol vessel was small, lightly armed by military standards, but the crew included someone named Vikla Stross, who informed the Blackwood ship that they had precisely 10 seconds to alter course or find out why humans invented the phrase, "fuck around and find out." The Blackwood ship ignored the warning. They had shields, weapons, a crew of 50 professional mercenaries. What they didn't have was experience with humans who'd been living on a sulfuric acid planet for 8 months and had developed opinions about unauthorized visitors. The human patrol vessel deployed something called a gravity mine. The Blackwood ship's engines failed. Then its life support started experiencing technical difficulties. Then Vikla Stross appeared on their communication screen, smiling pleasantly, and explained that the next mine would be attached directly to their hull and would create a tiny, localized gravity well. that would compress their ship like a soda can. The Blackwood Mining Consortium departed quickly and filed no complaint because filing complaints meant admitting they'd attempted unauthorized resource theft, which carried massive penalties under Galactic law. Similar incidents occurred at 3 other colonies. Each time, human defenders responded with what Council observers delicately termed disproportionate creativity. Nobody died, but everyone got the message. Humans were protective of their death worlds, aggressively protective, the kind of protective that suggested maybe trying to steal from people who lived on planets that killed normal people was a terrible idea. Vex Thyler read the incident reports and made another note in his personal file. The note read, "Humans are terrifying when protecting their territory. Remember this, always." 6 months after the first deployments, Vex Thyler received a request for a meeting from Colonial Administrator Pitch, the human leading the Kreshnor Prime settlement. "Administrator Vex Thyler, Grayson Pitch here. We need to talk about expansion." "Expansion? You've been there 6 months." "Yeah, and we've outgrown Base Camp 1. We've got 60 people now, more coming. We need approval for 3 additional settlement sites and infrastructure development." "You want to build cities on that nightmare planet?" "Eventually, yeah. Right now, just towns. Small ones, maybe a few thousand people each. We've identified locations with good mineral access, reasonable shelter from the acid storms, and scenic views." "Scenic views?" "Administrator, you've never seen a Kreshnor Prime sunset. The sulfuric acid in the atmosphere creates these colors that are incredible. We're thinking tourism potential down the line." "Tourism? On a planet where the atmosphere eats metal?" "Sure. Obviously visitors would need suits, but that's part of the experience. Visit Kreshnor Prime, where even the AI wants you dead." That's a great tagline. Marketing is already working on brochures. Vex Thyler wanted to scream, wanted to resign, wanted to find a nice, quiet monastery somewhere and contemplate the fundamental absurdity of the universe. Instead, he approved the expansion request, because what else could he do? The humans were succeeding, the resources were flowing. The other council species were happy with their new access to previously unavailable materials. The economy was booming. It was working. Against all logic, probability, and common sense, it was working. 3 more months passed. The Deathworld colonies continued expanding. Human population across all settlements reached 6,000. Resource extraction increased by 300%. Scientific discoveries were being published faster than peer review could handle them. And then, the Vex Thyler received a communication that made everything else seem trivial. "Administrator," Plockneth said, his tone grave, "we have a situation. A real situation." "How real?" "Category Omega real." Vex Thyler's 3 eye stalks went rigid. "Category Omega, the designation reserved for cosmic-scale threats." "Show me." The hologram displayed a region of space 40 light-years from the nearest council world. Something was there, something that shouldn't exist. "It's a rogue gas giant," Plockneth explained. "Mass approximately 300 times standard. But that's not the problem." "What's the problem?" "It's heading toward the Thelios system, home to the Thelian species, population 83 billion. And our calculations show that in approximately 18 months, it's going to pass close enough to destabilize orbital mechanics. 3 of their planets will be pulled out of safe orbits. Evacuation. Impossible. We don't have ships to move 83 billion people in 18 months. Even if we did, where would they go? We'd need to find habitable space for an entire species." Vex Thyler felt cold. "What are our options?" "We're working on it. The science division is exploring gravitational manipulation. Maybe we can alter the gas giant's trajectory, but the energy requirements are massive, and the time frame is tight. Get everyone on this. Everyone. This is priority absolute." For 2 weeks, the greatest minds in the galaxy worked on the problem. Physicists, engineers, mathematicians, specialists in gravitational mechanics and stellar dynamics. They ran simulations, proposed solutions, discarded them when the math didn't work. Nothing worked. "We're missing something," declared Chief Scientist Prithkan during an emergency council session. "The energy requirements to deflect something that massive are beyond our capabilities. We'd need to essentially build a star mass engine in 18 months, which is impossible." "What about fragmenting it?" someone suggested. "Worse, we'd turn one problem into 300 smaller problems. Debris field would devastate multiple systems." The chamber fell silent. 83 billion lives. No solution. Ambassador Thorne, who'd been sitting quietly in the observer section, raised her hand. "Yes, Ambassador," Vexthila said, grasping at any possibility. "I might have an idea. It's stupid. It probably won't work, but it's an idea. We're listening. The gas giant is going to pass through open space before it reaches Thelios, right? No planets in the way?" "Correct." "Why? What if we don't try to move the whole thing? What if we just change its composition, reduce its mass?" Prithkan's scales flushed confused purple. "How would that— Wait, are you suggesting mining it?" "I'm suggesting mining the hell out of it. You said it's 300 times standard planetary mass. That's a lot of harvestable material. Gas giants contain hydrogen, helium, methane, all sorts of useful stuff. What if we extract enough mass to reduce its gravitational influence? That would require mining operations on a scale we've never attempted, in open space, at velocities that would kill anyone who tried." "You're right," Ambassador Thorne said calmly. "It would kill anyone normal. But what about people who aren't normal? People who colonize planets where the atmosphere eats metal? People who consider 900% gravity a challenge?" The chamber went absolutely silent. "You want to put humans on a rogue gas giant," Vexthila said slowly. "I want to put humans in a rogue gas giant, the outer atmospheric layers. Set up extraction platforms. Pull out as much mass as possible. You need to remove, 10% of total mass to alter trajectory enough?" "Closer to 15%, Prythkan corrected automatically, "but that's still trillions of tons of material, in 18 months, while the object is moving. So we'll need a lot of people. Good thing we have 98,000 humans on a waiting list, and good thing extracting resources from hostile environments is literally what we've been doing for the past year." Vexthila stared at her. "This is insane." "Probably. But do you have a better idea?" Nobody did. The Rogue Giant project began 3 days later. It was the largest human mobilization since Earth joined the Galactic Council. 15,000 volunteers, 200 transport ships. Engineering equipment ranging from standard mining rigs to experimental mass extraction systems designed specifically for gas giant operations. The humans called it the Great Harvest. Everyone else called it a desperate attempt to avoid catastrophe, using a species that didn't understand the concept of reasonable caution. The first extraction platforms were deployed 32 days after project approval. They were massive structures, each the size of a small city, designed to float in the upper atmosphere of the gas giant while processing and ejecting material into space where collection vessels would retrieve it. The conditions were nightmarish. Winds at velocities that would shred normal spacecraft, pressure fluctuations that crushed instruments, temperatures that ranged from 300 degrees to -400. Radiation levels that required shielding so heavy that ships could barely move. The humans set up camp and got to work. Project lead was a woman named Destrin Kale, an engineer who'd previously worked on Earth's deep ocean platforms and had volunteered specifically because this sounds like the ocean but more. Her first report to the council was memorable. "Status update. We're operational. Conditions are spectacular. Lost 2 platforms in the first week to structural failure, but salvaged the equipment. designed new anchoring system using localized gravity manipulation. It works, currently extracting approximately 6 million tons per day. Need more extraction units. Also, someone keep telling people to stop trying to surf the wind currents in maintenance suits. We've had 3 incidents. Everyone survived, but my stress levels are not optimal. 6 million tons per day. It was working. Month 2. Extraction rate increased to 9 million tons per day. 50 platforms operational. Human crews rotating every 3 weeks due to the physical strain. But they were doing it. Month 4. 15 million tons per day. The gas giant was measurably smaller. Gravitational calculations showed trajectory shift of 0.3 degrees. Not enough, but progress. Month 8. 28 million tons per day. The operation had grown beyond anyone's projections. Humans had developed new extraction techniques, improved platform designs, and somehow turned the most dangerous mining operation in history into a competitive sport. Crews were competing for extraction records. There were prizes. Vex Thelor watched the progress reports with the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences. They were going to do it. Against every probability, they were going to succeed. Month 12. 40 million tons per day. Trajectory shift of 1.8 degrees. Thelios Systems scientists confirmed that if rates continued, the gas giant would pass safely beyond critical influence range. The Thelian species, who had been preparing for evacuation and societal collapse, started celebrating early. Month 16, 53 million tons per day. Some platforms had been operating continuously for over a year. Humans had established permanent settlement structures on some of them. People were living on extraction platforms in the atmosphere of a rogue gas giant. Why, Vex Thelor asked Destrin Kale during a status conference, why would anyone choose to live there? The view, she said simply, and the storms. They're beautiful, like nothing we have on Earth. Plus, rent is cheap. Month 18. The rogue gas giant passed the Thelios system at a distance of 4.8 billion kilometers, well beyond critical range. The planets remained in stable orbits. 83 billion lives saved. The humans had done it. The Galactic Council held an emergency celebration session. Awards were distributed. Speeches were made. The Thelian ambassador wept openly while thanking the human volunteers. Ambassador Thorne accepted the recognition with grace and humility, then immediately asked when the Council needed help with their next impossible problem. Because that's what humans did now. They solved impossible problems on death worlds in gas giants, wherever normal people couldn't survive. They'd found their niche in the galaxy, and that niche was everywhere terrible. Vex Thelor sat in his office 3 weeks after the Thelios save, reviewing the updated council reports. Human colonies on 48 death worlds, human mining operations in 6 gas giants, human scientific outposts in locations that had been written off as unreachable, and 98,000 names still on the volunteer waiting list. "Sir," Plockneth entered, looking nervous, "we have new applications." "Of course we do. Not from humans, sir. From humans for humans, but these are different." "How different?" "They're applying for Category 15 death worlds, the ones we classified as unsurvivable under any circumstances." Vex Thelor felt his eye stalks droop. "What are Category 15 conditions again?" "Temperature extremes beyond measurement, gravity fluctuations that liquefy normal matter, atmospheres that are technically on fire, radiation levels that cause atoms to decay prematurely. And humans want to go there? 62 applications so far. They're calling it the ultimate challenge." Vex Thelor started laughing. It was a tired, slightly hysterical laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. "Approve them, sir, approve them. At this point, if humans say they can survive somewhere, I believe them, even if physics says otherwise, especially if physics says otherwise." "But, sir..." "Plockneth, A year ago, humans were a curiosity, an oddity from a dangerous planet. Now they've colonized worlds we thought were worthless, saved an entire species from extinction, and somehow turned Deathworld mining into a competitive sport with prizes. If they want to try Category 15 worlds, let them. What's the worst that could happen? They'll succeed and make us look stupid again? Plockneth hesitated. There's one more thing. The humans are requesting permission to rename several of the Deathworlds they've colonized. To what? New Texas, New Australia, New Canada, and one they want to call Bob's Place, after someone named Bob, who apparently died there heroically, but whose last words were, "Name something after me or I'll haunt you." Vexthilor approved those too. 5 years later, the Galactic Council held its annual assembly. 78 human colonies on Deathworlds. Human population in hostile environments, 140,000. Category 15, worlds successfully colonized. 3. Number of species saved by human intervention in impossible situations. 4. Ambassador Thorne, who was now senior ambassador due to Earth's economic and strategic importance, gave the keynote address. 5 years ago, the Council asked for volunteers for Deathworlds. Only humans raised their hands. You thought we were crazy. You thought we'd fail. You thought you were sending us to our deaths. And you know what? Some of us did die. 237 humans have died on Deathworld colonies. That's 0.17% of our deployment population, which means 99.83% of us survived. On worlds you said were unsurvivable. We didn't survive because we're better than you. We survived because we're from a Deathworld. Earth trained us. Every human carries the legacy of a planet that tried to kill our ancestors for millions of years. And our ancestors said no. They said, we're staying, we're thriving, we're building civilizations. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. So when you asked who volunteers for Deathworlds, we raised our hands because those worlds aren't death to us. They're opportunity, their challenge, their home. The chamber erupted in applause, not just from the human delegation, from everyone. Because the galaxy had learned something important, something fundamental about the nature of life and survival, and what it means to be truly adaptable. Sometimes the most impossible problems require the most impossible people. And humanity, born from a world of fire and ice and storms and predators and diseases and every possible catastrophe evolution could imagine, was exactly that impossible. Vexthilor watched the celebration from his seat, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not frustration, not confusion, not despair at the fundamental illogic of the universe. Pride. He was proud of the insane humans. Proud that the Council had, through sheer bureaucratic accident, stumbled into the best decision they'd ever made. Proud that when the galaxy needed someone to stand in the impossible places and say, "We've got this," humanity had answered. Somewhere in the Thelios system, 83 billion Thelians were alive because humans had decided that mining a rogue gas giant sounded interesting. Somewhere on Kreshnor Prime, a restaurant was serving dinner to tourists in environmental suits while acid rain hammered the shields outside. Somewhere on a Category 15 world that physics said couldn't support life, a human colony was not just surviving, but prospering because humans had looked at unsurvivable and heard a challenge. And somewhere in the depths of space, another impossible problem was forming. Another crisis that would require impossible people. Vexthilor wasn't worried. Because when that crisis came, when the galaxy needed volunteers for the truly impossible, he knew exactly who would raise their hands. Enthusiastically, probably while laughing, the humans would volunteer. They always volunteered, because that's what humans did. They looked at the word impossible and heard a suggestion. A starting point, an opportunity, and the universe, vast and cold and endlessly dangerous, had finally met its match. not in technology or weapons or ancient wisdom, but in a species that simply refused to accept that anything was too dangerous, too hostile, or too deadly to call home. The galaxy had asked 2 volunteers for Deathworlds. Only humans raised their hands. And the universe learned to be very careful about what it considered impossible.